We got one going right now. Russell Gahagan here from Russell's Fishing Tech. We're going to start a video series here with 3 videos in a row talking about how to set up your boat with the proper amount of rods and which rods to use. We're going to go over a 6-rod spread, we're going to go over a 9-rod spread, and we're going to go over a 12-rod spread. And that basically covers 2 people, 3 people, and 4 people in a boat for most fishermen that are in Wisconsin or Michigan on Lake Michigan. So what I find is that almost every day I get a call from a customer, or a customer stops in and says, I'm just starting out in Lake Michigan fishing and I need to outfit my boat. What should I get? Or the dreaded call I get, unfortunately happens a lot, which is, I started last year or the year before, I kind of hodgepodged a bunch of stuff. It didn't work very well. I lost some fish. I broke some stuff off. Now I need to kind of figure out where I really should be at. So the first suggestion that I make to all customers is spend money on reels, save money on rods. So keep that in mind as we're going through everything. That's the first thing. So we're going to start with this video talking about a 6-rod spread. And like I said, the key to this is save money on your rods, spend the money on your reels. The 2 reel options that I suggest for Lake Michigan fishing, and I'm going to suggest in both of these 6-rod spreads, is the Okuma products, Okuma Convector 30D, the CV30D, which is the 30 size reel. Looks like that might be upside down. There we go. Oh, there we go. Okuma 30D, CV30D. And then also the Okuma 303D, the cold water, the CW 303D. So first thing, what's the difference between these 2 reels? The Convector retails for $89.99. The cold water retails for $109.99. The cold water has a couple more metal parts on it than the Convector. Both of these will work adequately for Lake Michigan fishing. Both of them will handle the big salmon out on Lake Michigan. It's just personal preference if you'd like to pay the extra $20 that it'll cost you to get into the cold water series to have a little bit nicer reel, or if you want to save that $20 and spend it somewhere else. But both of those will work. So all of the setups that we're going to be talking about in the 6-rod spread is the 303D or the 30D, excuse me, the 30 size in both reels. So that's nice. You don't have to have any real big equipment. And there's 2 options when I'm rigging up a new customer with a 6-rod spread. And we'll go over those 2 options. Option 1 is the no downrigger option. I talk to a lot of customers that are starting out. They're on a fixed budget and they want to get going. They have no equipment. They don't own any downriggers, and they say, you know, should I really spend $800 to $1,000 on downriggers? My answer to them is no. Downriggers are a useful tool on the Great Lakes for salmon and trout fishing, but one of the lower volume fish catchers at this point. Because of the clearer water in the Great Lakes, I find that downriggers are not as productive as they once were. Dipsy divers and planer boards are quite a bit more productive. So if you're on a fixed income or a fixed budget and you want to start with a 6-rod spread, you don't need downriggers to do that. So that's the first spread we're going to go over. That spread would be a 2-diver setup, and both of those divers would be rigged with 50-pound braid. And I would start with either a 9/6, a 10-foot, or a 10/6 rod. And I got some options here on inexpensive rods. Here is a Shimano Tdr 9'6" Dipsy rod. This is a great rod for budget cost. It's about $30, so it does a really good job for the customers that want to pick up this Shimano version. Otherwise, the Okuma Classic Pro rod, so the Okuma Classic Pro series, which is inexpensive. This rod also retails for about $32.99. This is available in a 9'6", a 10-foot, and a 10/6 diver option. So I'd recommend going with either the Shimano Tdr or the Okuma Classic Pro series if you want to stay inexpensive on your rods, and a 9'6", 10-foot, or 10/6 rod. And the idea there with that longer rod is, if you want to add, if you start with 6 rods and you want to add more rods later and add another pair of dipsies, we're going to go to a smaller rod for inside divers. And that's really what's key here. You know, what we do at the Reel Shot here in Sheboygan is we always plan in advance. I never want any of my customers to waste any money. That's critical. We want you to spend the money correctly once, and if you want to add to it, awesome, but we don't want you to have to buy again just because you bought the wrong stuff or you decide to switch sizes or whatever. So as long as you go with your 2 diver rods being a 9/6, a 10-foot, or a 10/6 rod, you can always make those your outside divers if you decide to go to 4 divers instead of 2. Then that leaves us with 4 planer board rods. So again, for this option number 1, if we're no downriggers, we're going to do 2 divers and 4 planer board rods. All my small boat guys, all the way up to charter boat guys, I now recommend 1 planer board rod, and that's it, 1 style of rod. And that's the Okuma Classic Pro Copper Rod, which is right here. It's the #1 selling rod at the Reel Shot for Great Lakes rods. So Okuma Classic Pro, it's kind of coppered colored down on the bottom. We sell hundreds and hundreds of these a year on the Reel Shot website, at the Appleton store, and at the Sheboygan store. It's just an awesome, all-around versatile rod that works for everything, and it's inexpensive at $44.99. So it makes it real affordable, and it works for everything. Why would you get that rod? Well, I'm going to recommend that you start with a certain type of setup, but if you decide later to add other types of setups, you only got to buy new reels. You don't have to buy more rods. Because that type of rod, being that it has the stainless guides on it, the nice silver stainless guides that you can see here in the video, that rod will handle weighted steel, it'll handle copper, it'll handle braid, it'll handle mono, so it'll handle all of it. If you go with just a standard rod, let's say like a TDR for example, because you could buy those for 30 bucks, you know, if you went with a TDR, then the downside to that is if you do anything other than mono or braid down the road, you wouldn't be able to use that rod. So now you'd have to purchase more rods, which we're trying to avoid. For 2 reasons. We'll save you some money, but also for storability. It makes it easier on the boat. Rods are much more difficult to store than reels are. So on those 4 planer boards, we're going to use that 8'6" Classic Pro Copper Rod. It's the only size they make. It's one size fits all, 8'6" Classic Pro Copper Rod. We're going to again use the 30 size reels, whether it's the Convector CV30D or the Coldwater CW303D. And on those, I'm going to suggest that you rig them with braid. We use Shimano backer and then 50-pound braid again, and that'll give you the option to use the pump handle setup that I talk a lot about. Well, why would we start with pump handles? Here's why. They're the most versatile. If you're going to have a 6-rod spread, you want to be able to cover from basically the surface all the way down to, you know, an 80, 90, 100 feet down. The only way to do that is with braided line and weights. You can use small inline sinkers, 1/2 ounce or 1 ounce, like the walleye guys use to fish that top 10. And you could use either the round pump handle weights or the big torpedo divers from Torpedo Company to get you all the way down to 80, 90 feet down. That's the most versatile setup for a guy that's just starting out here and that wants to purchase 6 rods and own 6 rods and be able to fish on a daily basis out there and catch fish. So that would be the option 1 with no downriggers of the 6-rod spread. Option 2 comes with 2 downriggers. So if you already own downriggers and you want to reset up, or if you buy a boat that owns downriggers, or you say, you know what, I can't live without the fish hawk, I don't want to own the X2, I want downriggers so I can put my X4 on my downriggers. Great, downriggers, like I said, work. They're a great tool for the Lake Michigan fishing or Lake Ontario. They're just not as productive. But if you're going to use downriggers, then the downrigger rods we suggest are either, again, the Shimano Tdr or the Okuma Classic Pro in a 7-foot to 8-foot medium light action. So again, we want a whippy rod when it comes to that. This one here is a medium light action TDR. It's real whippy. I wanted to try and keep it together so you can see that. You can kind of see how whippy that rod is in the video. For downriggers, you want a real whippy rod. And the reason is it's the only setup that we're using anymore on the Great Lakes that doesn't have something for the fish to pull around. In other words, you know, divers, you have the dipsy itself, which is heavy, and the fish has got to pull that around to tire them out. copper lead core weighted steel. That's a heavy line. The fish has got to pull that around, plus a planer board to tire them out. And the pump handles, you got the round balls or the torpedo sinkers, they got to tow that around to pull them out, to pull around to tire them out. With downriggers, once it releases off the downrigger ball, it's just you and the fish. And a lot of times what we find with those fish, they come to the boat very green. And we want a nice medium light action whippy rod that can handle the fish going crazy at the back of the boat and has a nice curve and bend so that it has some flexibility to handle that stress. It's the other reason why it's the only setup that we're going to talk about today that we put mono line on. And I suggest Andy Clear mono in 20 to 25 pound test on your 2 downrigger rods. And again, we're going to go with that 30 size reels. All the reels we're talking about today are the 30s, either the Convector 30D or the Coldwater 303 with 20 to 25 pound mono on those. So then we got 2 downriggers in option 2. Now we're going to do 2 divers, and the diver setups are going to be exactly the same. We're going to rig those with braid, and we're going to set those up with something between a 9'6" and a 10'6" rod. And again, you may say to yourself, well, why braid and not mono? Well, braid allows you to get deeper, but you can also fish shallow with braid. You might say, well, why braid and not wire? Same thing. Braid's more versatile. Allows you to get deeper, but it also allows you to get shallower. Mono can only go down about 40, 50, 60 feet. Wire doesn't fish very well in the top 10, 20 feet. So your best option if you want to go with a 6 rod spread and be versatile is braid divers. And you can use slide divers, you can use deeper divers, you can use dipsy divers. That's a whole nother subject. But the rod and reel itself is with 50 pound braid and a 9'6", a 10 footer, a 10'6" rod. And then if we went with the 2 riggers and the 2 divers, then it leaves us with 2 planer boards. And this is a great setup. We again would go with that same classic Pro copper rod, and we would put a 30 size reel on there spooled with backing and a braid line so that you can run that with the pump handles, the torpedo weights, or just small inline sinkers to fish cohos, steelhead, kings around the harbor, you know, up near the surface. So that is a great option for a 6 rod spread that will allow you to catch a ton of fish out on the Great Lakes. It'll be a reasonable budget, but it'll also allow you to expand further into 8, 9, 12 rod spreads down the road if you decide to, without having to replace anything. I hope you enjoyed this video. Look for my 9 rod spread and my 12 rod spread video coming soon. Good luck.